Hello, my name is Jennifer Eubank, and welcome to the Sun and Moon YouTube channel. We're here every weekday from 10 to about 10:30 with a little snippet of yoga, 10 o'clock Eastern Standard Time each weekday morning, and I'm Jennifer Eubank. I'm here Fridays at 10 o'clock, so please mark your calendar. And I have for you today part 3 of my Hips Don't Lie series. So we'll be doing some more exploratory work with that all-important joints, the all-important joints, the hip joints. And we have been focusing on opening up the hips the last couple of weeks. Today I want to focus more on stabilizing the hips. Good morning, Robert. Hello. All right, so I'm on the floor, but we will start in a standing position in just a moment. But I wanted to be down on the floor so I can get more up close and personal. You may want to have a block and a blanket on hand for today's practice. Neither is necessary, but if you have them, it's really nice to have them and grab them if you decide you need them. And like I said, today we'll start in a standing position. So as you're ready, stand up and come into a basic mountain position. Feet are hip-width distance apart, and feet are under the knees are under the hips, and the hips are under the shoulders. So you're kind of forming two lines, from shoulders to hips to knees to ankles. And they're pretty much parallel, and if they're not, make them parallel. Judge the feet in relation to the shoulders, judge the hips in relation to the feet, and vice versa. And you're on your way to a pretty good mountain pose. So we'll stop there and we'll get back to that mountain. But first I'd like everybody to put your hands on your hip joints. So take both hands and place them on your hip joints. And if you did this, it's okay. It's no big deal. But these are technically not your hip joints. And we all think, okay, hip joints, hips. But these are not your hip joints. These are the crest of your hips. The hip joints are located where the thigh bone hooks into the torso. So your hip joint is right here. And it's really kind of hard to put your hands on your hip joints. It's pretty elusive. This morning I was trying to find my hip joint with my fingers, and you can't really do it. You can with your elbows and your shoulders, but it's harder with those hip joints. So knowing the distinction between your hip crest and your hip joint can go a long way in helping you protect your hip joints, just knowing where they are. So let's get back to our mountain position. And root into your feet. Find the corners of your feet evenly and weight into them evenly. And then draw that energy up the legs. And then soften the knees and soften the hips. And draw your belly in and lift your sternum and soften the shoulders. And stand here for just a few moments in this mountain position. And maybe close your eyes. And take your mind into those hip joints that we just discussed. And breathe. Nice deep breaths as you breathe into those as you think about those hip joints. And it's almost as if we're sending the breath into those hip joints, and we're getting a little massage in the hip joints with that breath. And if you want a bigger massage, take bigger, longer breaths. And maybe hold on to the inhale for a breath, a beat or two before you let go of it. And then as you're ready, glide your eyes back open. And then let's put our hands on our hip crests. And then let's bring our feet a little bit wider and loosey-goosey your knees. And then let's start some hip rolls. So root into your feet and start drawing circles with your hips. And start in one direction and stay with that direction. Start small and start to really feel those feet, rooting into the feet, and bend the knees a little bit more, and maybe your circles can start to get a little bit bigger. And we're breathing nice and gentle, smooth breaths in and out through the nose. And notice those hip joints. These are ball and socket joints. So maybe you can kind of feel that ball rolling around where the torso and the legs hook up. Breathe through it. We'll go a couple more rounds. See if your circles can get a little bit more expansive. And then as you're ready, let's start to make the circles a little bit smaller. Still feel those feet. Feet are really rooted into the floor as I go round and round. That helps protect those hips. So now I'm going to find a good pause point, and then I'll switch directions. And we start small in the other direction because you want to see, does it feel okay on this side? Because every side is different. And then once you've made the determinations, start to get into it. Find your hips. What messages are they sending you as you go round and round and round? Do you need to go bigger? Do you need to get smaller? And as we go round and round, we're creating nature's own motor oil, called synovial fluid. Motion is lotion, one of our teachers at the studio says. And as we go round and round, we're creating that synovial fluid, juicing up our joints. All right, let's go a couple more rounds. Make them a little bit smaller and smaller and smaller, so you're kind of corkscrewing back into the center. And then take your hands off those hip crests. And then let's heel toe our feet back into mountain pose. And let's march in place a little bit. And then root into your corners of your feet, lift your toes, widen them and put them down a couple times. And then when you're ready, set them completely down. Feel those corners of your feet, all corners of your feet evenly rooted, and draw that energy up the legs. Draw the belly in, lift your sternum, and relax your shoulders, your hips, your knees. Soften your face. And then, when you're ready, root into the feet, root into your belly, draw your arms up overhead, and then swan dive, hinge at your hips, and slowly come down to a forward fold position. I'll turn to the side so that you can see me from the side. And we'll hang out here for a few counts in our forward fold. You can put your hand on the block, the floor, your feet or your legs, and we'll stay here as long as you can and see if you can even up those hips. They're in line. One is not in front of the other and one is not higher than the other. And then when you're ready, root those feet evenly, bend the knees, and then hinge at the hips and lift halfway up to a halfway point, and put your hands either above the knees or below the knees. And you can keep your elbows bent or your arms straight. It's up to you. And now you're in a half forward fold. And we'll spend a few counts here and see if we can find a nice wide back as much as possible. So widen your hips and widen your shoulders and everything in between. So you're not rounded. You want to make basically a 90-degree angle. And then when you're ready, root into the feet, bend those knees, hinge at the hips, lift back up, and bring your hands back into place. And we'll do that a couple more times. And as I did that, I forgot to come back down. So the way we do this, these are called mini sun salutations. So we extend up, and then we hinge at the hips, root into the floor, and come down. And then you root into the feet, hinge, lift, Root into the feet, hinge, lower. Root into the feet, hinge, rise up. Arms might go overhead and come back down. And we'll do that a few more times. Inhale, extend up. Exhale, hinge at the hips. Come all the way down. Inhale, hinge up. Exhale, hinge down. Inhale, hinge up. Hinge being the operative word here. So I'll go again from the side. So we're hinging at the hips. Belly drawn in, chest lifted. Back is flat as we hinge down. Back is flat as we hinge up. And hinge back down. And hinge all the way up. Really using these hips. Let's do 2 more. Many sun salutations. Nice way to get things going and lube up those hip joints and find that breath, movement, coordination. You get a lot done here with these many sun salutations. And we'll finish up in mountain with the hands in front of the heart for a few breaths. And then as you're ready, release those hands. And we're back in mountain pose. I'm going to take a couple of breaths, noticing if anything has changed in your mountain. Root the feet, draw the belly in, relax your shoulders and hips. And see if you can imagine that your hips are in line, forming a horizontal line. One is not higher than the other. One is not coming forward or further back than the other. Take the time to find that horizontal line there. And then when you're ready, let's do some chair poses from our sun salutes. So as you're ready, let's inhale, extend up. Exhale, swan dive down. And then inhale, lift halfway up. And then from here, we'll go into a chair. So as you're ready, go ahead and bend the knees and hinge the hips as if you're going to sit a chair and lift your belly in, lift your chest, and then lift your arms up. And we're coming up into our chair pose. Keep the feet nice and rooted, hips even, knees soft and even. And then when you're ready, use an inhale to lift up and an exhale to bring the hands down. And let's do that a couple more times. So as you're ready, inhale, lift the arms up. Exhale, swan dive down, hinge at those hips, come all the way down. Take as much time as you need on that lower half. And when you're ready, come up into that halfway position. Stay as long as you want. And then when you're ready, root those feet. Maybe wriggle your toes a little bit to help you root those feet. Bend the knees, hinge the hips, draw the belly in, lift the sternum, and then lift those arms up. And root those feet a little bit more deeply and see if you can bend a little bit more. It's a great way to stabilize the hips and to strengthen the muscles around the hips. And as you're ready, use an inhale to lift back up and use an exhale. Keep the chest lifted as the arms float back down. And let's do one more. Inhale, lift up, and exhale, swan dive down. Inhale, lift halfway up. Hang out here for a couple of breaths. Figure out what you need to find your way into your next chair. And maybe you can go a little deeper. The stronger, the more rooted the feet, the looser and more freedom that the knees and the hips have. And then when you're ready, press into the floor with the feet, straighten the legs, keep the chest and the belly extended and rooted. Engaged, and bring those arms down. Take a couple of breaths. I'll turn back around. And just notice what's going on in your mountain pose after you've done a few chair poses. So chair poses are a great way to strengthen the legs, the glute muscles in the butt, and also all the core muscles in the torso, in the belly, the chest, the sides, the ribs, and the back. Really nice, powerful pose. Sometimes you'll hear it called powerful pose. And sometimes you'll hear it called awkward pose because it can be different. I mean, it can be hard to hold. And I usually come into it like this, but I really liked how we lifted up into it today. I found that a much easier entrance for my chair for me. And my hips liked that entrance better. So I want to thank Vicki, who drove that home for me last night in my class last night. Okay, so now let's do one more chair. So I'm going to face the front again, and we'll make our way into our forward fold, and we'll make our way into our half forward fold. And when you're ready, root those feet, bend the knees, hinge the hips, draw the belly in, lift the sternum, lift the chest, and come into that chair one more time. And then when you're ready, let's straighten the legs and come back into our forward fold. So instead of lifting, come back down. Hands on the floor, bend your knees, step one foot back and then the other foot back, and lift up into a downward facing dog. Feet are hip width distance apart, hands are shoulder width distance apart, and you can start to roam a little bit in your dog. Pick up your feet and come back down a few times. You can walk your dog. And if you were tired and you wanted to come immediately into a rest position, you could come down into table, or you could come down into puppy, or you can come all the way down to child's pose. And then when you're ready, how about we do one more downward facing dog? Let's keep the dog pretty narrow this time. Hands under the shoulders, feet in line with the hips. And draw your hips up and lift those hips up, and then try to bring the hips towards the wall behind you, which means you got to bring those feet down, which means you got to really stretch out those hamstrings. And if you have tight hamstrings, it can be hard to get those feet all the way down. So you can walk the feet a little bit closer in, or you can put a wedge under your heels. And feel the power that the hips get from rooted, grounded feet. The more grounded the feet, the more safe the hips are. And then as you're ready, let's all make our way back down into table. Take your time coming back down into table. And when we get into table, find those hands under the shoulders, knees under the hips. So organize a good table. And then root into your hands and root into your knees. And root into the calves and the feet behind the knees. Find that foundation and soften your knees, your elbows a little bit. And then as you're ready, curve your spine down towards the floor. And as you do that, the hips start to come up and the elbows start to bend a little bit more. And then as you're ready, press into the hands, the knees, the calves, the feet, and round your spine towards the ceiling into cat pose. And we'll go back and forth. So as you go back and forth between your cats and cows, I'd like for you to really focus on rooting into the foundation points. The hands, even the fingers, the tips of the fingers, the pad of the finger, the knee, the calves, the feet. So ask your whole body to go into your cats and cows. I used to cue cows and cats, arch your hips, tuck your hips, arch your hips, tuck your hips. It's so much more than that. Yes, it might kind of feel like it's just that, but the more you do it and the bigger you go and the more you pay attention to it, the more you realize it's not just about the hips moving back and forth. And as we ask the whole body to participate, then we start building good habits to protect our hips and not overtax those hips. So when you're ready, come back to table and let's all sit back on our heels and breathe as we shake out our wrists and our hands a little bit. And then when you're ready, I'm going to come on this mat. We'll do some crescents from here. So now we're back in our table. Bring your hips out to one side and then turn and look over the shoulder and look at that hip. So you're curving your spine to one side. And then bring your head back and then bring your hips back. And then take your hips to the other side. Turn, look over the shoulder at those hips. Maybe curve a little bit more deeply. And then as you're ready, head comes back, hips come back. Reconnect with your table, and then do it again on the other side. Hips come out, curve, look over the shoulder, hello hips, and then come on back, and do it again on the other side. Hips out, look over the shoulder, curving the spine. Come back with the head, then the hips. Let's do it one more time. Maybe coordinate the breath a little bit more with it. Inhale the head back. Inhale the hips back. Next inhale, come on out. Next inhale, look over the shoulder. As you exhale, deepen that curve. Take a few breaths. And then as you're ready, head comes back, hips come back. And then let's bring our hands forward. Oh no, you know what? Let's sit back. Anytime you want to sit back and do this, okay? Come on back to your table, and then as you're ready, bring your hands forward for rocking horses. We did these last week in our last session, and we'll go back and forth. And notice that we're kind of going into a plank and a puppy. Plank and puppy. Plank, 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 plank. She says this several times because I want to stress our planks. We're going to start doing some planks. So when you're ready, next time you're in that front forward position in a kneeling plank, let's hang out here for a couple of breaths and organize that plank. Make sure the hands are under the shoulders, belly drawn in, chest lifted, and if you'd like, you can curl your toes in the back and pick your legs up and increase the challenge of your plank. Another really nice way to strengthen all the muscles around the hip joints. You can't really strengthen your hip joints, you can only really strengthen the muscles around the hip joints. And that's what makes the hip joints stronger, quote unquote. So anytime you want to come back down and do some movement, you can do that. But what I'd like to do is do at least 3 planks. And you can do the quieter version on your knees because you can definitely gain some muscle strength in the belly, the low back, the upper back, the chest, the muscles in the ribs, core muscles basically. And you can definitely do some good butt and upper leg strengthening here. And you can increase that by picking up. So maybe after a couple of breaths, you're like, you know what, I've got this. I've got this. And feel free, if you'd like, to lift those hips up into a dog from a plank. And you can experiment in going back and forth between dogs and planks, which I think is one of the best ways to stabilize and align those hips and strengthen all the muscles around those hip joints, the thigh muscles, the butt muscles, the lower back and the belly muscles, etc., etc., etc. Anytime you want to take a rest in child's pose, do so. And if you can't get your head and your hips all the way down, you could opt for puppy. Hips and the head up in the air. and still get that lengthening feeling in your spine. And remember, we're doing 3 planks. So I'm going to go and do my third one. I'm starting in the kneeling version and coming up. And I like coming up from the ground up into my plank. It's a nice way. Very different from coming down into plank. So it's really nice to explore those different pathways into your plank. From coming up and down, from coming down and up into it, because that uses the muscles a little bit differently, and it keeps things interesting for our muscles and keeps variety. Okay. So, now, let's do a little bit of tail wagging in our hips from our table. And then from table, let's bring our forearms down. I'm going to bring my forearms forward a little bit because I need more room. So we're in a Sphinx table, and then draw 1 foot back and 1 foot back and lower down. And you've lowered down into Sphinx. Let's stay in Sphinx just long enough to feel the sensations. Okay, I'm in a subtle, calming back bend here. Let's take a few breaths into it. Even up your hips, even up your shoulders. Press the hip crest bones into the floor. And then as you're ready, let's lower down into crocodile. Bend the elbows, stack the hands one on top of the other, and then bring your feet as wide as the mat. And let's take 5 long breaths in crocodile. And as you breathe in your crocodile, take your mind into your hip joints. And at some point, take your mind into the crests of your hips. Kind of go around the hips with your eyes and your mind and your breath, and breathing through that. And then when you're ready, let's go ahead and turn over onto your back. And as you turn onto your back, grab your block. And let's get ready for a bridge prep. So hips are even, knees are bent, and the feet and knees are equidistant apart. So if the feet are close together, knees are close together. If the feet are apart, knees are apart. Organize your foundation, the feet, the hips, the torso, the head, the arms, and then press into those foundation points. Have your block ready, lift up, and take that block and put it right under your sacrum. That's the part of your spine in between your hips. We talked about it a little bit in our last session. And settle down. So the widest part of your spine in between the hips is right on the block. I'm going to come forward a little bit. And this is a nice way to finish up our practice today, a supported bridge pose. This is a nice way to bring alignment and a sense of stability to your hips. And you're pretty safe because you've got the block protecting you. And if you want more of a challenge at this point, you can lift up and do some bridges. But at this point, we're quieting down. So if you want to keep going, you make that determination. If you're going to stop soon, hang out for a few more breaths in your supported bridge. And we'll just stay on this bottom level because that's all we have time for. But at some point we might, in the future, experiment with lifting up higher on our supported on our block in our supported bridge. So let's just take a few more quiet moments to notice what's going on in your hips. And let's do that experiment again. Take your mind into your hip crests and breathe in and out. And then as you're ready, travel down into the hip joints. And maybe draw a line from your right hip joint to your left hip joint. And then maybe draw a line from your left hip joint to your left hip crest. And then draw a line from your left hip crest to your right hip crest. And then draw a line from your right hip crest to your right hip joint. And go back and forth, drawing lines, maybe crisscrossing, maybe going from a left hip crest to the right hip joint. All the while, breathe and keep the knees and the feet still and stable. Just notice the relation between the hips, the knees, the feet, the knees, the hips, the shoulders. Find those mountain lines in your bridge pose. And does that help organize your bridge and align the hips, align the shoulders? And if you'd like to stay here, you could stay here and play around with supported bridge. If you'd like, you can lift up and take the block out and bring the hips back down and stay here for a breath or two. And you can windshield wiper your knees. And you can go into Shavasana, or you can get up and do more work. We've done lots of warm-up work, so you could keep your yoga session continuing. But if you're ready to finish for your day, or finish your practice and get on with your day, let's meet in a seated position with or without some support. And then root into your sits bones. Draw your belly in, lift your sternum, relax the shoulders, relax the knees, and soften your face. Soften that worry out of your forehead, out of your eyes, and take a few more quiet breaths as you sit nice and tall, and maybe take your mind back into your hip crests. And then take your mind into your hip joints. And breathe in and out, massaging the hip joints with that breath. And as you're ready, we can bring our hands together in front of our heart center. Namaste. Thank you so much. Again, I'm Jennifer Eubank, here every Friday at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time on the Sun and Moon YouTube channel. We're here every day, 10 o'clock. I'm here Fridays. If you want a more interactive experience, please join me with in our Zoom classes. I teach Hatha all levels on Thursdays at 4 o'clock, so check out our website. And I hope to see you again next Friday. We'll do another installment in our Hips Don't Lie series. So thank you so much for your time. Be safe, be well, be happy. Thank you.